I think, just checking this is working, because at the moment it's not. I just want to check that it is actually working. I'm wondering, my computer is having an absolute brain fart. Oh, there we go. Oh, it's very bitty. Bitty. Let's have a look. This is great entertainment, by the way. I do apologise. We will start in a second. Ready? Oh, it's working buffering. Okay. Let's see if that gets any better over the next few times. If not, we can. Okay, sorry. Hello, my name is Lewis. I am a business consultant focusing on growth and change for organizations and businesses. Today, we're doing something different again. Reason for this is we just want to try different things on the channel, see which things work, see what we like doing, what we don't like doing, what feedback we get. That's great. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through and we're going to talk about the Culture Code. Culture Code is a book I read back when it came out in 2017. And it does form a really core part of my business and the guidance that my business does deliver to organizations and companies. And that's the idea of that if you have a good culture, if you have a good working environment, if that working environment feels safe, then people will feel better, they'll stay longer, they'll do the things that you want them to do, and you'll get better ideas as a result. So what I want to do today is have a look at it. I reread it over the last couple of days. And what's really interesting is how my perspective has changed on the book. And some of the things that it does really well, but also some of the things that it doesn't do very well, and some of the things it may miss. And no book is perfect. No book is going to provide you with the complete thing that you need. And it's always worth looking at things critically and objectively. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. It's just evaluating it objectively. So let's go. So there we go. So there are kind of three pillars, three core bits of the Culture Code. And the kind of elements, pillars, I think they're referenced a few different times in the book as different things. But the key element is build safety. And this means building a psychological safety. So what that means is that people don't feel threatened or like they can't come up with good ideas or bad ideas. You want to make sure that everybody trusts everybody else, that you're creating this team not out of fear, not with someone kind of at the top shouting and screaming, but more as someone who is, as a leader, someone who is fostering an environment where people want to turn up to work and they want to be part of the solution and they want to help other people and they want to collaborate. What this does is it allows people to play effectively. So it allows people to do things, to experiment, to succeed, to fail in a way that doesn't have any fear attached to it. And again, this is one of the things that is less interesting to me now than it was previously. Is we There's a lot of talk of kind of belonging cues and body language, and there's a lot of sociology within the book. And there's a list here of the kind of things that are talked about. So there are things that you should do body language style and in the way that you talk and the way that you think, that I think if you don't naturally do that, you could come across as being off or creepy or fake. And that is so proximity, eye contact, energy, mimicry, turn taking, attention, body language, vocal pitch, and consistency of emphasis. A couple of those are really good. The ones I really, really like are turn taking, attention, and consistency of emphasis. If we take something like vocal pitch, if anybody's looked at Theranos, the leader of Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes, lowered her voice considerably, and this was done apparently in a way to have more gravitas and to be taken more seriously. That's a way of applying vocal pitch in a wrong way. For me, it's about being excited and interesting and talking in a way. It's about not raising my voice too much, but I kind of have a naturally loud voice anyway. So one of the things that I have to make sure is that my my excitement, my volume is not misconstrued as being aggressive. And the way you do that is by making sure you have attention, and that people take turns. Mimicry, you're starting to kind of move over into a little bit of I don't want to use the word creepy, but I feel like if you do it intentionally and you do it with the idea that you're going to affect and impact other people, that's not very empathetic. That's kind of a bit controlling and a bit fake. And so keep an idea of these are the kind of things that you want to do and to build safety. But I think here, which is really important, is ask people what they want. If you've got an introvert, you're going to say, how would you like me to help you be better? How would you like me to address you and talk to you? Are you an email guy? Are you a talking a coffee shop kind of girl? What is it that you're trying to, how do I make you better? One of the things here is with the culture code is this book, it seems to want to set out a very specific way of doing things. And actually, I think you need a bit more freedom. And not everyone will respond to these key elements in the same way. And so it's about building a team that works for everyone, which is equity. So the second one is share your vulnerability. So strong teams thrive on openness and transparency. Embracing vulnerability allows team members to connect on a deeper level, fostering collaboration and mutual support. And then leaders admitting mistakes to build trust. When leaders admit their mistakes, it cultivates an atmosphere of trust. Yeah, I when I go into, in fact, our whole way of doing business consultancy is done on the way, on a way of trying to explain that the good ideas will not be coming from me in the first instance. So the way I like to do that is by going in and saying, I'm here as a facilitator. I'm here as someone who is trying to help get the best ideas. And the way you do that is by trusting other people to do the work, trust other people to have the best ideas. I've not got 20 years of experience of working in a warehouse. I've not got sales experience. But what I can do as a consultant is come in and look at how people's ideas are not being pushed through the system. And the way you do that is by going in and immediately saying, I don't know everything. I'm not the guy to come in and solve all of your problems alone. One of our core values is consultancy through collaboration. It's through people talking to people. And so what I'm going to do as a consultant is come in and be open with you about what I know and what I don't know. And I'm going to ask you a lot of stupid questions. And the reason why I think that's a key, not just from team building, which is what Culture Code talks about, but also from a perspective of customer understanding, is your customer also knows nothing about you before you start. So asking these simple questions and embracing openness and admitting mistakes and talking about what you know and what you don't know provides a system where you are understanding better where people's knowledge levels are. And by saying, I wasn't very good at this at the start, but I learned, you're actually providing inspiration. So that second key element, so the first key element is to, bear with me a second, is to build that safety. And then in the book, the second one is to share your vulnerability. That makes you part of the team, not above the team. And then the third one is establish purpose. And this is in so many books. You've got Simon Sinek. A lot of the work that we do is on mission building and value statements and all of that good stuff. Aligning members with a clear mission and shared goals. Establishing a clear mission and shared goals aligns team members and enhances their commitment. This alignment is essential for driving collective effort towards success. If you're no matter what level of business you are on, the book says, and I agree with the book, that if you know why you're doing something, you will do it, and you agree with that thing, and you feel part of that thing, and you feel like you have a genuine part to play in the success of the organization, and you're given responsibilities, you will be able to deliver better, for longer, for stronger. And that's because you can see a goal. If I said, if you do this, and part of this is KPI setting, but most of it is about having a goal. We need to get this off the shelf in 6 months. How can you help us? Let's have that communication. Let's have that sharing. And then reinforcing purpose through storytelling. Storytelling is super interesting. We're doing, within the company at the moment, we're doing a little bit of work on storytelling. And the reason why is because storytelling is the oldest thing. This is, again, something the book says. Storytelling is one of the oldest forms of communication and also the oldest forms of learning. I used to hunt bison. This is how I hunt bison. When I hunt bison like this, I get bison. That's a very old story from prehistory, but it's the reason why we need bison meat is to survive so that we can grow and be and be a community for longer. That storytelling. What is your company storytelling? And if you have a story that reaches back into the past and is of the present, but also shows where you're going to go in the future, you will align your members with, or you will align your team with a clear mission and shared goals, because you're saying, this is where we've come from and this is where we're going. And where we're going is we want to help more people live fulfilling lives, or whatever it might be. And so that shared goal and that shared mission is super important. So they go through a couple of case studies. There's a case study on Pixar. And then this is something that I like to do. So we have something called the 25-75 rule. So I want to get paid and I want to do the work that I need to do for 75%. So I can effectively play for 25%. That doesn't mean going playing Balatro, which is my favorite game at the moment, or chess or football. What that means is that I get to go and do things that might lead to positivity in the future, whether that be a new system or a new mentality or a new product or service that we want to provide. But if I just work, I'm never developing anything. And if I'm only ever developing anything to make money, I am not doing this bit. I'm not failing, I'm not learning. So one of the things we're working on at the moment is, how do we help charities more? How do we, for people who are volunteering, how do we get them more involved? And another thing that we're working on at the moment is, how do we better engage with communities on projects? So how do we get them to talk to each other? How do we get out of the way of communities so that they can tell their own stories? So we're working on something like that. And what Pixar does is it employs a brain trust system. So it employs that encourages open and honest feedback, and it fosters a culture of continuous improvement. What it also does is it allows you to go off and do things. So one of the key parts of a Pixar movie, and they do them less now, which is upsetting, is the small things at the start. Sorry, the small films at the start of a Pixar film. Lava, the one with the birds on the wire. They are playful. They're short. They're usually done to show the proof of concept. So if you look at Lava and you look at Moana, you will see that there are links between the water systems that they're using to build that short and Moana. And so by allowing people to just go and play and do the things that you need to do, that helps. But it needs to be in a system where people are able to play about feedback and understanding. The next one is the Navy SEALs. So obviously, if you're in a war zone with someone and you really need to work with them, and it goes into quite a lot of detail about what happened, and it's one of the few times it goes into this is a problem and we're going to solve it with deep trust is what they were calling it. So it's more collaborative in a literal sense. So, people have an understanding of what it is they need to do, where they sit within a business. They know that they can have feedback and up and down the command chain, and that if they see something, they should say something, and we should be collaborative working on that. And that's what I did. I actually think what's interesting is it was the thing that I thought would resonate least with me in the book, but has actually resonated most within the book for me, which is this idea of a very rigid, very formal command structure embracing psychological safety. I think that's a really cool and interesting thing to do. And I think if the Navy SEALs can do it, then anyone can do it. Whether you should or not, it is I personally think it's a good thing, but some people won't. And then the San Antonio Spurs, they're a basketball team in the NBA, and they focus on humility and teamwork, collaboration, mutual respect. And so there's not this kind of big leader within the. So if you think about taking the NBA analogy further, you think about someone like Kobe Bryant or LeBron James. They are people who dominate the teams that they are on. And usually you will see that when those players leave that team, the team will slightly fall apart. If you look at in football, Alex Ferguson, when Alex Ferguson left Manchester United, the whole thing fell apart because he was such a cultural dominator, and because there was no yes, he promoted teamwork and humility, but it was done not with mutual respect and collaboration. It was done with I am. I am the boss. I know how this works. I've already won 10. And this is fine. This is a way of working. It's not the way that I would like to work with. I've already won multiple championships, Premier League titles, and I want to. And you will do it my way. Otherwise, you're going to leave, like Roy Keane or Yab Stam or whoever else left the club. But he also knew his limits because Ronaldo and Paul Scholes and Rooney used to get away with more because they are generational talents. But that then creates a lack of psychological safety. So the Spurs are more on collaboration and mutual respect, and that works for them. But for Manchester United and Alex Ferguson, it didn't work. Whether you could get away with that kind of leadership now, I think Pep does it to a certain extent at Manchester City, and I think there are other players that don't. But there are other teams out there that are equally successful by having this collegiate, collaborative, and mutual respectful way of working. So, having now spent, good lord, 7.5, 8 years, including 6 years running my own business, what's changed for me from my first reading of Culture Code to where it is now? One of the things is it's a very well told retelling of Scarf, which we've talked about, and you can find a live stream about that on the channel. But it's just Scarf. I don't think it feels very much like it's been written by a journalist. It's very easy to read. It's very easy to understand. It's done in a very storytelling kind of way, which is great, and that's the way books should be. I've got some books on the shelf over there that are written in a very kind of methodical and scientific approach, and that's great for the subject that they're going on. I don't think this would work. this feels like an investigative journalist uncovering, in inverted commas, a new truth for the 21st century. The issue for me is that SCARF, which is status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness. I've got one missing there. Oh, terrible. And oh man, and now my brain has gone completely blank. Bear with me a second. This isn't embarrassing. I don't talk about this 20 times a day. What does the F stand for in SCARF? Good Lord. I hate it. Don't you hate it when this happens? When your brain just completely that you've known for years? SCARF is... I'm going to now read the article I wrote client on the thing. Fairness. Of course it's fairness. So yes, I had to go online, an article that I wrote for a client to find out what the F stands for. So yes, F stands for fairness. Okay. Let's go back here for just 1 second. Where were we? There. Leaders admitting mistakes to build trusts. We're all humans. It's the reason why we put pencils. Pencils have rubbers. So yes, don't feel like you have to know everything all of the time, and don't feel like you can't make mistakes. You can. So anyway, so the idea of SCARF. So the idea of SCARF is that every employee wants to feel important and valued, that they want certainty in their job. This is all psychological safety. If an employee knows their job, what their goals are, and how they're expected to perform, they do better. Autonomy, so that's that trust, thinking and being allowed to think for yourself. Part of that is also being able to make mistakes and failure and all of that kind of good stuff. And then relatedness, that's the teamwork, productivity, employee retention, all rise when people feel the team. And then fairness. So one of the things that we're doing at the moment with a client is talking about what is fair. And actually, fairness can be a little bit of um, a kind of generational or cultural thing. So the idea of difference between equality and equity. So flexible working. There are some jobs within the company that we're working with that you can't have from home working because it's physical, it's moving things around, it's warehouse based. But then there are others that aren't. And so equality would be either everyone can work from home or no one can work from home. And that doesn't really work. And equity is creating a culture where everybody understands that everybody is different and providing the things that people need to do their job well, and compensating and understanding and doing all of that together. And that's fairness. And that's what a lot of this is about. So, rather than Alex Ferguson treating Ronaldo differently than, I don't know, Patrice Evra or Gary Neville, it's about treating everybody the same for the same reasons. Now, are those actually the same things? Alex Ferguson would say so. Alex Ferguson would say that Ronaldo wouldn't react in the same way that Gary Neville did, and therefore all he's doing is working with them, pushing the right buttons and creating a collegiate team. Other people would say you shouldn't throw boots at David Beckham's head. What it is that you want to do. So these things are subjective. And one of the things about this book is, and we're going to get onto criticisms in a second, is it's very black and white. And actually, with business books, it's really interesting because one of my key issues with business books in general is they have some great information. They have some really good, solid knowledge to kind of transfer over to people. But what all business books do is they treat it very much like a black and white thing. This thing I am talking about, this culture code, is the solution to problems. And it's never not the solution, because if it's never not the solution, then why are you reading this book? So there's almost this kind of mantra, this kind of way of thinking in business books that this is the goal, this is the way it's going to work. And so let's talk a little bit about the criticisms of the culture code. And when I say criticisms, I don't mean therefore it's crap and you shouldn't read it. What I'm saying is, from a critical perspective, what can we look at to see how, what can we learn from what it doesn't say? What can we learn from how it talks about certain things that maybe it didn't intend? So firstly, I kind of mentioned this, which is an overemphasis on small signals versus organizational structures. So the idea of this is, and it's called the culture code, so why wouldn't it be? If you have this great culture where everybody is trusted, everybody feels psychologically safe, and everybody can work and be collaborative and work as a team and feel really close, you don't need anything else. So it rarely goes into genuine organizational structures you will need. It doesn't talk too much about what happens when it goes wrong on an individual level, what happens when someone doesn't fit, what do you do about that? Do you bend, all of that kind of stuff. But, and this is the third issue as well, is that it's suitable for small teams because in a small team of 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people, you don't need that organizational structure to the level that if you've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 people. The culture code is great for small teams, but the problem comes as well, switching on to the third one, is if you've got this amazing culture machine in one department, but you've not got it in every department, then that can be an issue. But then if you've got 1,000 culture machines all working together and no overarching structure, no overarching strategy, so the leadership is managing, you can then get siloing, you can get kingdoms, you can get kings and queens running around demanding things from other people, you can get wars. And so the culture code is great for a more an interpersonal relationship situation. But once you scale it, it seems to fall apart a little bit because because it's called the culture code and it's not called the appropriate systems and a blended mix of having culture and good HR department and a finance department and a more of an overarching leadership role. It can't work. Yes, Navy SEALs usually have about 5 or 6 people in them. The Spurs have maximum 10, 15, 20 players. So it's easier to do on that. Another thing, and again, this is a problem that comes with a lot of business books, is what happens when it fails? And it's really interesting because the second part of the culture code is embrace failure, be honest and be vulnerable. I was screaming out for 2 things within the culture code. First thing I was screaming out for is, what does the mirror universe, to borrow a Star Trek phrase, what does the evil version of a company look like? When you have none of this, when you have psychological fear, when let's go back, let's reverse this. When you have no safety, when everyone is constantly threatened, when you are aggressive and rude, what happens? When you don't share vulnerability, when you're seen as this kind of demagogue, when you're seen as this kind of leader that is infallible and cannot make mistakes. And I'm sure you're all thinking of examples in the news right now of governments and organizations and individuals who are strong men, strong women, who are trying to push a narrative and will never admit a mistake. And so that's an issue. What happens when you don't establish purpose? What happens when you don't have a clear goal? What happens when you have 2 of these, but not one of them? What happens when you have one of them, but not 2 of them? That's another potential issue here. So that kind of failure is interesting for me, and I'd love to know what the understanding in more depth would be for that. But also, what happens when there's too much of this? So there's nothing in the world that, if you have too much of it, doesn't have some sort of catastrophic impact. Too much exercise, you die. Too much oxygen, you will get hypoxia and die. Or too much water, you will drown. Too much, whatever it might be. It too much of a good thing can be as lethal as a bad thing. And so, what happens when you have too much of this? And for me, it gets clicky. You have people, you start to get us versus them. It creates a situation. it'll create a situation where you're not bringing in talent, because I think you will get a group think or a monoculture where you're hiring and you're breeding and you're creating all of the same people. To go back to a football analogy, one of the big problems with Manchester City, which is my football team at the moment, is that they are headed by a person, Pep Guardiola, who has this idea of a culture, but it's his idea of a culture. So when a player comes in, like, for example, Jack Grealish, who is expressive and expansive and creative, what he seems to have done, and I might be wrong on this, is shaved off all the good bits and created this kind of boring player who isn't quite as good as he used to be and can't do the job he's being asked to do now. And that's because there is a culture at Manchester City that requires you to be in a certain way, act in a certain way, play your football in a certain way. So if you're not like that, even if you are a fantastic £100 million player, you don't get to be part of it, and you'll feel like an outsider. It will feel, and I feel like that, some of the cultures that you create here have a very high stress situation. And I think sometimes if you're the wrong kind of culture for that, you are excluded, you're pushed away, you feel other, you don't feel included. And so that can be the outcome of a good culture that's gone too far. And so balancing that and understanding that too much of a good thing is important. But again, you don't sell books by saying too much of a good thing can kill you. This has to be a solution. So I get it. I understand. So let's have a quick look at some quotes. Cohesion happens not when members of a group are smarter, but when they are lit up by clear, steady signals of safe connection. Yep, agree with that completely. Belonging cues have to do not with character or discipline, but with building an environment that answers the big question. Are we connected? Do we share a future? Are we safe? Probably need slightly more than that, but I get the point. Stories are not just stories. They are the best invention ever created for delivering mental models and drive behavior. Yes, storytelling is great. And it's the best way to create kinship and to teach people how to do things. When an idea becomes part of a language, it becomes part of a default way of thinking. Yes, but I think that can work in both ways. So I think if an idea is so strong that it eliminates other ideas, I think it can have that counterintuitive approach of feeling like you've got to go along with it. And yeah, I think you have to be present and understanding and thinking about what it is you can do. Leaping into the unknown when done alongside others causes the solid ground of trust to materialize beneath the feet. It's a bit evangelical and a bit, and you should never leap into the unknown. You should research a little bit first and make sure that there's enough space for you and all of that kind of stuff. And the most effective listeners behave like trampolines. They aren't passive sponges. They are active responders, absorbing what the other person gives, supporting them, and adding energy to help the conversation gain velocity and attitude. And I completely agree with that. And the way you do that is by asking open questions. How do we do this? How do you see this? Where can we go with this? Not, I want to do this, how do we do it? Because that stifles that creativity. Couple of technical hiccups today. We'll refer you to this thing, which is about vulnerability and making mistakes. I hope you've enjoyed this. I love talking about my favourite books. I've got a couple of others up there. If there's any particular book you would like me to read and give you my thoughts and opinions on, please let me know. We'll be back next week with another one. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope